Thanks, David, and good morning, everybody. Great to be back in the city of Sales, and what a fantastic view out that window there, isn't it? Just marvellous. Takes me back to the days before the America's Cup, when this was actually one of the dirtiest pieces of water in New Zealand. And didn't that cup transform the city? And that's why we've got to win it back again. And I put quite a bit of my own money into helping that happen, and I'm absolutely confident we can do it. So watch this space, and hopefully we'll transform the rest of the waterfront here. Just before I start on talking about some of our investments, I've been following a speech by Dr. Peter Watson, who you'll hear this afternoon, and that sort of set the scene quite nicely for me, because what Peter talks about, and you'll hear it, is how New Zealand is positioned to sell to the Asia Pacific as opposed to the Northern Hemisphere. And, well, should I say, Europe and North America. And what I think I've learned after 35 years now of travelling to Southeast Asia, and in particular China, is this massive opportunity that is coming our way. And so most of the businesses that we are looking at these days are, in fact, pointing towards that market. Still quite a few, obviously, to Europe and the US, but that, I believe, is the big focus that we need to concentrate on, particularly for the next decade. You heard Tony, in his passionate way, talk about reducing sugar. One of the investments you'll see come up here is a company called BioVitoria, and this company, New Zealand owned, has been developing a fruit sweetener in China. Actually, this is the only place in the world that this low-hunt fruit grows. But it's 100% natural, and we're now starting to see some really good sales going into North America, and let's hope it'll go into all these fizzy drinks that Tony's talking about. So, we get a win-win. Kids can still enjoy drinking that stuff, but it actually does them absolutely no harm. I did also want to preview by just saying that most of the things that I'll talk about in terms of our investments have had a lot of the money go into patents. Now, Jeff talked a lot about just getting on with it, which I totally agree with, and there are a number of companies in the startup phase where you just do not have the money to put into patents. But if you're looking at some stage for an exit, almost every time companies we've invested in are looking for exits, one of the most important questions that new investors want to know is, how have you protected this? How can you stop someone else from doing it? And so patents are incredibly important. I'm reminded of one of the industries that have actually absolutely boomed here in New Zealand over the last decade, and that's the film industry. And why is that? Well, one of the major reasons, of course, are the huge tax breaks that industry gets in New Zealand. And so I'm reminded that we also need help, not just from ourselves and from overseas investors, but we do need help from government to help us put the right environment in place so we can supercharge these new companies that are coming together. The other one that I thought was worth quickly talking about was the innovation that really I've been part of, I guess, in all my working life. And it really did start with the warehouse. We brought in new innovation at the very beginning. I think we were the first retailers to have a computer system at point of sale. We were the first people to have a swipe card on our, barcodes on our products. I think the first people to have an in-house email, and then we had a fantastic distribution system that we put in place well before a lot of other companies. And that's flowed on also to the work we do through the Tindall Foundation. And in hearing Tony's speech this morning, I thought it's quite important that we try, as a country, to look at how we match demand with supply. One of the best innovations we've been involved with at the foundation is with the Counties Manukau's DHB. They had a chat to us about 3 years ago and explained how they have 7,000 employees and a churn of about 700 a year, so 700 new people. And they were sourcing almost all their nurses and occupational therapists and physios, etc., from the Philippines or from India. It just seemed to us to be a travesty when we've got this massive human resource sitting in South Auckland. Most of the people that are in the hospital at Middlemore are Pacific Island and Maori, and yet we're not servicing them from our own people. And so we started a process back then, it's called Grow Our Own. We started with some academy schools, and we took the parents and the kids to the hospital and said, look, these are the sorts of jobs that you guys can get involved in. And by the way, they pay about $70,000 a year. Now, these families, particularly the parents' eyes lit up because they're sending normally their kids off to work at the age of 15 because, you know, they're poor. They need more income. But when they realised that with some better education they could get their kids into higher paid jobs in this way, the lights really went on. And the feedback we're getting from these academy schools is just amazing. So many of these kids have decided to change from ordinary NCEA subjects in the arts into maths and science. The pipeline has begun. I think it was 41 Murray midwives graduated this year. This is really working. And I think if we apply just common sense to a lot of the things we do, not only out there from a social perspective, but in our business, in a way that Jeff, I guess, espoused this morning, you know, just getting out there and selling for a start. These types of common sense ways will, I think, pull us through to a position where we'll be much better off. You know, after I reinvested all my money for the first 14 years in the warehouse, and we then floated the company in 1994, and we started to get dividends along with the other shareholders. That was sort of an inflection point for me, and I thought, what is it I can do to reinvest in this country that is really going to help? You know, actions speak louder than words. And so, first of all, the Tindall Foundation was born. And secondly, we started to dabble in investing in young startup companies. And it's a lot of those that I want to talk to you about now. I truly believe when I see the innovation that goes on in this country, when people walk through our door on a regular basis with these absolutely amazing ideas, that this country does have the ability to turn those into some really big businesses. And I've got a case study on one that I want to share with you this morning. And it's really important that we embrace that. It's really important that we all get in behind these businesses. I mean, for too long, people who have had surplus money in their pockets have always gone and invested in property. And, you know, while that has been a reasonably safe investment, it doesn't create a productive economy. And we've got to produce exports so that we can solve a lot of the problems that we face coming at us. We can't continue to borrow. We've got to be a productive nation. Bridget Liddell is going to talk about diversity, and I think it's incredibly important we do that. Something that I've been personally involved in is organising an apprenticeship scheme for directors for public companies, and you'll see some news about that in the next couple of months, and I'd really appreciate it, those of you involved in public companies, to look very seriously at that. So let's get started on these companies that, we'll just go back for a minute. Those of you that can't read some of those from right way down the back, they include businesses that we will split up on the next few slides into different categories. But one that's sticking out there straight away, I see Zygem. It's a New Zealand invention that is something like a half-hour DNA test. Huge interest in the US to put that in through the police system. Let's just go on Yike Bike. We were just in Christchurch 2 days ago. A great invention by Grant Ryan down there. The first sales of those bikes were carbon fibre, and they're very expensive, virtually all selling online. Realised he needed to get a cheaper version. He's now made one out of aluminium, which sells for a lot less, and he's appointed distributors in Europe. Very good interest in a company that I think we'll see go a long, long way. So these are the clean tech companies. Now, Jeff talked about clean tech, and I'll talk a little bit more about Pure Advantage, the group that we're all involved in. But some of these companies, and in particular LanzaTech, I think can transform New Zealand's image. You know, we are ahead of the curve. It is still, in terms of most people's perception, an incredibly clean, green country. But we must protect that for our future. At the same time, we must leverage it. And so some of these companies that we've been involved in from a clean tech perspective, we actively look for because we believe it's a competitive advantage that New Zealand has. Products that come from nature, I just mentioned by Victoria with the Pure Low. You'll also notice on there Icebreaker. It's a company we're hugely proud of being shareholders of, and it's doing incredibly well, massive growth rates, over 50% of its business in Europe, 25% in North America. And the stores that are being put down, we have 2 in New York now, 1 in San Francisco, several in Canada. They're doing brilliantly well, and helped very much by the Kia expats in those countries. They get invited along to the opening and given a big discount, and they tell their friends, and that kickstart those businesses. So Jeremy Moon, the founder of that company, is going to be honoured tomorrow night as one of the world-class New Zealanders, and for the first time I'm not a judge, so he was able to be picked. No conflict of interest this year. Electronics and software, as you can see, quite a large number of companies there. And I was talking about IP before, and one of the companies that comes up and comes to mind on that slide is Phytech. Now, we invested an awful lot in IP and in patents in that company. What it doesn't stop, though, are companies, particularly in the US, from coming along and trying to head you off at the pass. And what happened in that instance was that the giant organisation of Bose decided that they thought they could take us on the same as they've closed down a number of other small companies. Because we had our IP and we believed we were right, we actually fought it. It didn't get to court, but it did cost $5 million to get there. So these are the sort of things you face. I mean, Jeff talked before about, you know, the fright he got when the excise tax came along. These are the things that are put in your way that actually make life very, very difficult. But we do have to stand up to them. We had another one of our companies that was faced by a similar sort of situation, Pure Depth. What one needs to do is actually be resolute and get your investors to stick with you and fight them. And luckily, in this case, because we had the IP in place, we were able to prevail. And then in the biotech medical field, and I think this is an area where New Zealand really has some competitive advantage as well. We seem to be able to put together ideas, particularly around medical devices. You know, one of the companies we're involved in, which we're very proud of, produces purified omega-3 from algae. Now, as you know, the world fish stocks are plummeting, and yet omega-3 is actually being seen as an incredible health food, and also in the pharmaceutical area. And we've perfected just out here in a small factory in Henderson, we've perfected being able to turn algae into the substance, and now there's massive interest in selling this product over the world, not only into the pharmaceutical area, but also into medical foods. Now I'd like to talk to you about a company that I think embraces not just New Zealand's clean and green image and the clean tech boom that I believe the world is coming to see, but it also, I think, demonstrates what can happen from a very, very humble beginning. And so just to point out very briefly the process at LanzaTech, you'd start off with a gas feed, and in this case it's carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide from a steel mill. It goes into this receptor, it gets compressed, and then it goes into a fermentation, and it's mixed with this bacteria. Now, I'm going to show you just a couple forward here. I'll just flick forward to them. When Sean Simpson first came and saw me, this was his lab. Very, very humble beginnings, and he came along with a test tube with some bacteria in it, and he asked us to invest in pretty much an idea. And a lot of the time people come to us, you know, it is really just an idea. Nothing's proven. They had some initial tests that looked very good, but you know, it is a leap of faith. We put $100,000 into getting them to the next leap of faith. And let's just track back here and show you where we went from there. So that's the process. This just tells you what the size of the market can be that we can actually produce ethanol from. So at the top there, we've got 80 million globally of pet coke being produced. which will produce 5 billion gallons of ethanol. In the steel industry, 1.4 billion actually converts to 30 billion gallons. But look at biomass at the bottom here. This is really the big opportunity for New Zealand. 190 billion gallons could be produced from biomass. So let's just flick forward a couple. And this was the first demonstration plant that we built out at Glenbrook. We had some discussions with BlueScope Steel to allow us to go onto their premises. They've been incredibly helpful all the way through. They gave us the land to put it on. They gave us the feed from their smokestack that they were formerly just flaring off the carbon monoxide, and we got started. It was a world first. And from there we moved to, this just shows you the opportunity that comes through from steel. Every one of those little blue dots represents 5 million tonnes of steel. And so you can see that while we've started our partnerships initially in China, there's a huge amount of potential throughout the world for us to actually produce this product. So this was the next demonstration plant. This is 40 times bigger than the BlueScope Steel one, and this has been completed earlier this year in Shanghai with Bao Steel. They've been running it since April. I actually got an updated report this morning, and we're making fantastic progress. I don't think there's any doubt that, and Bao Steel are pushing us very hard for the first full commercial plant to be started probably late this year, early next year. And by 2014, we'll be producing vast quantities of ethanol. Now, you know, the beauty of this is obviously those of you that read about what happened at the Beijing Olympics, you know, they had to basically shut down most of the industry within a wide radius of Beijing because of the air pollution. I've been to Shanghai not long ago. I'm back up there in a couple of months, but you know, the air pollution is incredibly bad. So not only does this help them clean up a noxious, I mean, carbon monoxide, as you know, is incredibly poisonous. This helps clean that up for them, but also it produces a fantastic biofuel. So let's just have a look at some of the other opportunities. In the top right-hand corner there, you'll see a picture of a whole lot of biomass. So this comes from a plant that we've purchased in the US called Freedom Pines. This was formerly being used and had a huge amount of investment go into it through the Department of Energy and through other venture capitalists, where they were trying to turn these forests into ethanol using enzymes. Now, unfortunately, that failed. Well, unfortunately for them. Fortunately for us, we were able to pick up the plant at a very cheap price. And using our technology on top of theirs, we are able to produce ethanol at a very, very good price. And so I see this as a great opportunity for New Zealand. You know, we spend about $8 billion a year on transport fuels. They all have to be imported. And the opportunity for us to use, you know, Pinus radiata, we can grow it faster than anyone else in the world. Not only just using the waste from it, but what's been proven here is they use the whole tree. Gives us an opportunity to be much more secure in our own transport fuels in the future. Then the next line down there, as you can see, we're talking here about municipal waste, solid municipal waste from India. You'll see on the last slide just how many contracts we've signed all over the world already. And bearing in mind it was only 6 years ago this company started, it just shows you how fast you can ramp up a business if you've got a mindset to do it. And I guess the other thing is that if people totally understand what you're doing, you have no problem getting more, new investors. So we hired a woman, Jennifer Holgram, from the United States. So she and a couple of people, the CFO and two others, sit in Chicago. She doesn't sit there for long. In fact, she's constantly travelling all over the world signing up deals for us. But what she's been able to do is to actually convince the rest of the world that this is real. And so when we put out, I guess, an IM last year for a capital raise of $50 million, it just happened basically like that overnight. I'll just hark back a minute because we did a similar thing last year with Bio-Pacific out of Dunedin. Now that's a technology that was in our bio slide, And that raised 20 million really quickly as well because of the compelling story of what it could do. Now, that is a bladder cancer diagnostic. A similar company came up with a diagnostic in the US a couple of years ago, and their market cap has gone to 800 million straight away because of the business case for this company. Ours, we think, could do similar things. So, instead of the very invasive and painful tests that they have used for diagnosing bladder cancer, this is just a simple urine test. The docs just send the tests into one lab, which is being built right now up in the Boston area, and it solves all those problems. So similarly in these cases, you'll see municipal waste with India, our biomass with the United States, but could also happen in New Zealand, and then of course the big one at the bottom at the moment with Bow Steel and the steel industry. Just very briefly, we're able to get much more productivity by using synthetic bugs now, and so there's a lot of contained research going on here in Auckland. The great thing about this company is it demonstrates to me how you can actually grow a business from world experts. We started off with just a few people in the lab over here in Parnell. Today we're up to 60. Most of them are PhDs. They are absolutely passionate about fermentation, and as you can appreciate, people do PhDs in various areas, but if they've got a passion for something they've studied, they want to be where it happens. And what better place but what you're just looking at out in the window here to live at the same time as working with your passion. And that's why New Zealand is a great place to do the R&D. Clearly we haven't got the market here because we haven't got the population, but we can headquarter companies here, we can actually grow them, and we can get people to come and work here willingly because it's such a great place to work and live. So the synthetic modification is taking place and giving us much better productivity. And if you have a look along the bottom here, as a result of that, we're able to produce a whole lot of very valuable chemicals. So, just ethanol wouldn't work for New Zealand, even if we had the capability of manufacturing it. Sending it overseas, transport-wise, is too expensive. But to produce some of these things like butanol, isoprene, etc., gives us the ability to actually sell very, very valuable chemicals from the same sort of process. And there's just a quick idea of how, when you genetically modify, you're able to come up with those particular chemicals on the right-hand side. Now, the greatest self-promoter in the world, Richard Branson, has grabbed hold of this because he understands, like a lot of airlines do, just how important it's going to be for the longevity of the airline industry that they use biofuels as opposed to Kyber hardware. What I really meant to say was hydrocarbons. And so Richard, you can see him down here promoting the opening of this thing, and they, along with a number of other big brands like Boeing and Swedish Biofuels, can actually turn our feedstocks into jet fuel, and that I think is something really worthy to watch. And that's the last slide of this particular part of the presentation, which shows you that the number of contracts Jennifer's been able to sign with people all over the world that are absolutely interested in this very hot space, coming out of little old New Zealand from one small test tube, one bacteria out of a rabbit, has actually in 6 years shown me, and I hope all of you, what we're capable of doing here in New Zealand. Now, Jeff touched on this before, and I just wanted to reiterate again, it's the same mission statement for Pure Advantage. I think Jeff explained very, very well, why we honestly believe this is the right thing to do. We have people like Rob Morrison, that's Lloyd's brother, Sir George Fistonich, Joan Withers, Justine Smythe, both Jeff and Rob Fife. We're all passionate about New Zealand and about what we can do as a nation to actually leverage the green growth. And it's all about the economic upside of being green. And these are just some of the environmental, I guess, degrading issues that are happening in New Zealand. Since '96, when I think we were classed as the cleanest, greenest country in the world, we've slipped quite considerably. And these are the sort of things that, as Jeff said, you know, you try to sell your green products around the world. People are starting to say, well, are you really green? So our strategy is to actually pick these 5 areas of expertise. The first one, energy efficiency, forestry and biofuel, geothermal, ecotourism, and sustainable energy efficient agriculture. Those are the 5 areas that we're picking to work. The global green growth potential is worth $6 trillion, and so this is a prize really worth going for. And our strategy from here is to pick companies that will partner with us to actually drive those 5 strategies forward. So already we've got one on global geothermal. They're going to spend a lot of money on promoting that and rolling that forward. One of our companies will be the one that will go with the biofuels, but we will continue to put forward this case as strongly as we possibly can, because we truly believe it's the future for New Zealand. So the strategy first is to research and define credible green growth opportunities, and the first of those papers comes out next month. Then we're going to recruit these companies. As I said, 2 of them are signed up pretty much already. And then we'll build clusters to deliver strategy, influence policy decision making in this area, because, you know, it doesn't just happen from the companies. We've got to get, you know, everybody behind this, including the government. If you didn't get the name before, there it is, www.pureadvantage.org. We'd love to have you on the website. The first position paper will come out in early June. That basically will give you a very good feel for where we stand, and then the next paper that will come out hot on the heels of that will be through the London School of Economics, and we believe paints the picture of how we're going to get there. So, in conclusion, just let me talk about a couple of other things that we're involved in that I think are really worth thinking about. These technology-type companies that spin from very small beginnings. One of them that we deal with out of Palmerston North is called Spider Tracks. That tracks small aircraft. So if an aircraft goes down, you know exactly where it's gone down. It's good for emergencies. Wellington Drive is a company that you would have seen there too on the Green Tech, and it's a publicly listed company, and we admit it's been through fairly hard times. We're very confident now, though, with the pipeline it's got with very big brands around the world buying its motors, very efficient motors, that's going to go a long, long way as well. So can I just commend to all of you to really think about investing in these types of young startup companies, because like LanzaTech, I truly believe they can turn into massive global companies. We've got a great incubator here in Auckland called the Ice House, connected to Auckland University, where you can go along and instead of putting, you know, $20,000 into a deposit on a house, you could put it into the deposit on a company and invest along with us in some of these very exciting ventures. I hope that's been helpful, and I really appreciate you listening. Cheers.